The president says it's time to take decisive steps towards establishing state police across Nigeria. Now, speaking at the State House during a meeting with Northeast governors, the president stressed the need for community-based security that fits each region's unique challenges. He praised the Civilian JTF's local efforts and said it's time to eliminate political barriers to real policing reform. Tinubu also assured that the new structure would be non-partisan and purely focused on public safety. A security expert, Salaudeen Hashim, joins us now to interrogate the renewed push for state police. Salaudeen, thanks so much for joining us and welcome. So let's start with the big picture, shall we? What's your take on the president's renewed push for state policing?
All right, I think it is very fundamental to say that state police is actually a framework that offers citizens an opportunity to have a perception of being guaranteed absolute protection. And then, of course, I hope again that the president is very clear about what he will communicate in that particular meeting. There is state police and there is state policing. And his reference to the CJTF as a yardstick is actually a state policing component, which is actually in a disaggregation of efforts for the entire local security stakeholders. But again, if he's talking about state police, I think there are two frameworks that must define the state police apparatus. One is that it actually must be owned locally, and two is that there must be some element of guaranteeing political neutrality. And this is actually one of the biggest fear that we have about the inability of state police infrastructure to be independent of political interference, considering the kind of political architecture that we have had in this country, the level of interference and involvement. And of course, we have seen governors who have sworn that banditry and local security resolution would happen in 2 months if they have access to command and control. And I think, again, it is very important for us to be very circumspect before we take that entire decision. Yes, state police is actually not something we can wish away, but we must actually grow the system and the institution to maturity to be able to allow the state police infrastructure to function without any political interference. That, for me, would be the way to go. But overall, it's actually a modern and more contemporary policing system that has actually shown to be very efficient and effective in different parts of the world.
And the question is, how realistic is this, right? And so let's look at it from all sides. Whether across the pond to, walking climes or countries that work, local policing somewhat is still partisan. And to say that it can be divorced from politics is almost utopian. And given how, our region and our country is, can we have local policing in a way where it's not partisanship and it can be, the system can be free from political influence? Can it work?
No, that is actually that is where the challenge really lies. If we cannot actually make that distinction to separate it with a very clear surgical process that allows the security functionality to operate with its own clear standard operating procedure, opportunities are there that we are going to create a new problem. The new problem where states, and considering the kinds and the personalities of governors that we have currently, and the weak accountability infrastructure at subnational level, and the level of power that is actually dominant. A number of people put searchlight on the federal government, but you need to see how governors act as emperors. And if you give an emperor the power to command a troop, tendencies are there that he uses it to be able to witch hunt political or perceived political enemy. So this is actually the biggest concern that has continued to confront the entire ideal, not because it is not a good idea, but because we have currently an elite capture of the society, and the kind of elite that capture the society are those who are actually not very shy to use and deploy power when the need arises. And that is the reason why the president, yes, must have a good intention by trying to provide a safer climb. But again, we need to put into context the governors at the state level and know how to be able to deploy this in such a way that they don't use it to be able to attack citizens. But in directly answering your question, it is a possibility, but whether it is a possibility in our context is something that we also need to interrogate a lot further.
And as we interrogate that, let's also talk about transparency and accountability, but most importantly, abuse of power. We saw this was what gave rise to the NSAS protests, and we also seen this at the local government level when it comes to Akune Chamber and the recent situation that happened in the news that we saw in Anambra State. And so I do have to ask about, how structure, the kind of structures that can safeguard these policing systems, if they are to be implemented, that can hold them accountable, transparent, and also be void of biases and abuse of power.
And now you have referenced something that is very fundamental. In security balance, recruitment and vetting are very key, and they're very relevant to the conduct of your personnel. It doesn't matter the code of ethics that you have put in place to control abuse of and the use of power. But again, if you recruit the wrong persons, tendencies are there that we are going to have a consistent or a deja vu of the current circumstances that we are currently confronted with. You have referenced the very unfortunate incident that is happening in Anambra, and this is not peculiar only to Anambra. If you go to various states, we have seen how the proliferation of voluntary security organizations have continued to abuse power, and they come in this very commando style to be able to also try to create this level of emphasis that they also have local authority to be able to function. This in itself is actually a big threat, although it is actually a poor perception of how security should function because of our inability to be able to put in place a very robust non-kinetic response plan, or to be able to institutionalize the technology-driven approach to security, and then we have proliferation of all of these small groups. So the fundamental element in all of this is that we must take care of recruitment. And this is where governors also have big challenge, because governors are likely going to use this particular process to also recruit political thugs into the state security architecture because of complete loyalty. And this in itself continues to create some element of using the body language of the governor to be able to respond to policies. Security-related issues are not driven by emotions, are not driven by the body language of the commander. It is actually driven based on needs. But again, that might not be the case because weak accountability would set in. And if you look at the political interference in security, there are also additional indicators that also comes with it. And that also requires that we need a framework that is very clear. And what is the oversight functions that also comes in? And that for me is also another element. Currently, at every state, you have the state houses of assembly, you have the state judicial function, and you realize that most of these institutions are at the control of the governor. I have seen a scenario where a governor presented a budget to the state house of assembly and then walked over to the side where the speaker sat and use a gavel to pass the budget.
Right.
That is actually executive rascality.
Right.
These are the kinds of things that we have seen.
Right.
Imagine that we give a governor...
Mr. Salaudeen, I wish we can continue the discussion, but I'm sorry to butt in there or to interrupt you, but I wish we can continue the discussion. But clearly, security takes time to go in depth and analyze it. But I must say thank you for taking out the time to join us. Mr. Salaudeen Hashim is a security expert as the presidency is now pushing for local state policing.